Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Patty Brennan Show. Today, we're going to have a really interesting show. And I want to tee it up for you to give you a feel for what got us to the discussion that we're going to have today. So many of you know that I am on an advisory board with MIT's Age Lab. You know that I've done podcasts with Dr. Joseph Coughlin. He wrote the book called The Longevity Economy. He is absolutely brilliant, and I have to tell all of you, this is the coolest thing that I get to do, to go up to Boston and be with these brilliant minds and learn about what are the latest and greatest discoveries as it relates to reframing the narrative, as it relates to what we call this thing retirement, and what are the stages of retirement, and what happens, and by the way, when. So every year, Dr. Joe and MIT has a symposium, and this year he asked if I could come up and speak. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, I was not able to make it, and I said to Joe, I said, would you like me to send somebody in my place? Because this is an area that we do a lot of work in. He said, Patty, I would love that. Long story short, my son, Michael Brennan, chip off the old block, as Dr. Joe would say, went in my place and spoke to the folks at MIT and an audience who wanted to learn more about how we do this thing called longevity, call it life planning, etc., because it's such an important part of what we do. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's first start off. I thought it was really interesting about what you learned about the 4 pillars.
Yeah, so what MIT looked at, in addition to a handful of other larger institutions, they actually conducted a gigantic study. The study focused on 4 pillars that compromise retirement today that people were most concerned about. Those 4 pillars were purpose, health, family, and finances. When I think back to those 4 pillars, it's kind of funny, and I internally joked as we were going through the results. I think back to purpose, family, health, and finances. There is a big intersection between all of them, and we, Patty, we tend to be a lot of the times right there smack dab at the center of that intersection. And the joke was that I actually turned to somebody else and I said, it's interesting that the person who was trained to talk about stocks and bonds and mutual funds and markets is now the person clients are talking to about their health, their family, and their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
How about that?
Michael, I'm telling you, that is what we've been about. That's
Right.
I know I'm beating the drum again, but people are not their money. And when we help them with those other 3 things that maybe the standard training isn't designed to do, we are much more holistic in our approach, and we're helping people live better lives. That's what it's all about. Okay, so we've talked about the 4 pillars. And I think that for many people in retirement, the biggest thing they worry about is cognitive decline. Now, Dr. Joe talks about the 4 phases of retirement. And, the first phase is fine. It's the honeymoon period. They're retired. They're loving life. But then they have the phase of complexity where, things are they want to simplify, et cetera. There are things that are happening in the brain during this phase of life, making big decisions. Should we downsize? Should we move? Should we move into one of these communities? And then the 4th phase is living solo. And now we're going to go back on the stage at MIT at that event where you killed it, according to Dr. Joe.
Yes.
And I'm going to pretend that I am the person interviewing you.
I have real quick, I just have to make a joke about this because I actually made a joke to all the people. When I was presented with the opportunity to go up to MIT, at first I'm like, oh, dear God, what in the God's name am I going to say on a stage to a whole bunch of, and I did my research, I don't know half of the acronyms that came after these people's names. I'm up to speed with PhD, but that's about where my knowledge ended. I do not know what these alphabet soups came after their names meant. But so internally, the way that I prepared for it, and I learned something great about myself. And I can get into that. Maybe that could be a different podcast or therapy session.
No, time out. Tell me what you learned.
When I first started going through this, I'm going up to MIT. I'm talking to people that specialize in dementia and Alzheimer's and aging. I need to know every single thing that I can possibly know about dementia and Alzheimer's and aging. And so I did. I started reading book after book. I started with this book called Longevity, which is phenomenal, by the way. Maybe wasn't the time and the place for me to be personally reading it, but my goodness, I learned more about DNA, cell structures, telomeres, how we can lengthen our telomeres to slow down our actual aging speed.
Okay, time out. I want to know about that.
Oh, you got it. You got it. But I mean, I'm telling you, and I say this to sort of poke fun at myself. Somebody, honestly, it was my father-in-law pointed this out that said, Michael, if you try to get up on stage at MIT and you start talking about DNA, cell structures, and telomeres, you will be ripped apart. You're not up there to talk about DNA and cell structures. You're up there because you're a financial advisor that has experience in dealing with this. So I had to completely, and again, I have to poke fun at myself because this is where my best thinking gets me, right? I try to become an expert in an area where I will never be an expert. These are the experts. They're coming to me. They want to hear from me what it looks like on our side of the stage.
Because you know what, Michael? That's the most, they're doing the research. And Dr. Joe tells me all the time, he's like, Patty, you're on the front lines. You are living this every single day. We can come up with our theories, and we just finished our podcast on, presidential cycle theory. Theories are just that.
Right.
What's the practical application? What's really happening in those people's lives on a day-to-day basis in all four pillars?
Right. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we are in fact living longer, what does that actually do to your day-to-day? How do you plan for if a client's going to retire at age 65, if they're not going to pass away until 100? I mean, we're talking about a retirement period over 40 years.
Okay, good segue. Perfect segue. First question. We're not going to be experts in the cognitive changes. So what are we doing? What kind of technology is changing everything, right? What are we doing to help our clients through these 4 phases of retirement and all the changes?
Right. And actually, believe it or not, I believe the question was posed to me on stage, when might such technology be adopted and begin to transform the business of advice? And my response was, I think it already has, at least especially from the relationship standpoint. The implications of any technology are going to allow us to do our job better. We can plan for longevity. We can plan and do plan for unexpected medical expenses, for long-term care stays, all of that. Every single one of our financial plans, we're going to stress test that thing. By default, all clients are going to have a built-in scenario, assuming that a long-term care or a nursing care stay is going to happen. By the way, it's going to come at a clip of $120,000 per year, and we're going to inflate that thing at 8% every year.
And what's cool about that, if I may say, is we're actually even building in scenarios to really reflect what probably actually happens, because honestly, people don't go directly into a nursing home.
Right.
Okay, so Michael, they talked about technology. You talked about technology up at MIT and how the industry is changing. Tell me more about what you spoke about there, whether it be the CFP or whatever.
Right. Well, I think just right off the bat, I think that the shift has already begun, especially for the good advisors in particular, when we're talking about the technology that we can utilize and lean on to help lead to more successful outcomes, retirements, all that good stuff. First of all, the industry as a whole has become much more holistic in recent years. The days of just being a stockbroker, the days of saying that you're an insurance salesman, they're not going to cut it anymore. I mean, we could just look at the CFP exam priority list of focus. They're focusing on psychology, estate planning, family planning, of course, markets, stocks, bonds, all that good stuff. But we're focusing on the portfolio allocation, the cash flow, estate planning, and and that flows directly into what we do and what we say. On a realistic basis, their education's one thing. CFP can teach you one thing. In practice, how does that actually translate? This is how it translates. I am taught we are taught and trained here not just to ask a client if they have their estate documents in order. No. We want to actually review them and understand the documents and make sure that they actually align with what the client really wants. We had a case recently, Patty, where the client's power of attorney was a little bit different than the client's revocable trust. It was different in the sense of how they defined the word incapacity. Very, very different.
Yep.
In that case, we're talking about taking education and tying it into practice. When all was said and done, in their case, because of this incongruence in definition of incapacity, it made more sense for us to favor and add more assets to the revocable trust.
It was really important.
It's a huge catch. And look, the average individual listener, they may not be able to notice what we're looking for. But please, 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 don't just present your documents to your financial advisor. Make sure that they read. It's just another extra set of well-trained eyes.
Perfect. Okay, so what do we worry about? What do we think about? What do we teach our clients? Because, again, we're holistic. And I think, honestly, I'm just going to say, since we're talking about technology, the number of scams that our educated clients, how many letters, how many examples have I sent out to clients saying, oh boy, here we go again. There was a dating scam. Particular client lost $65,000 plus. Another scam occurred where somebody, their computer was scammed. So it just is, we have to be so careful and educate. And again, technology can be terrific, but okay, fine, get an iPad. How do they use it? Call an Uber. How do they call an Uber? Let's walk them through how do they call an Uber. Let's just not assume that they know what in the world we're talking about. That's hands-on, really helping people on a practical level day to day to live those better lives.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with their portfolio, has nothing to do with their insurance or their 401ks, has everything to do with their peace of mind.
So here's one thing I learned, and I've researched this before, I've looked into it before, and I have actually told my wife, this is where you're taking me if this comes. There is something that I've always struggled with, and that is this thought of taking a confused person, and I apologize if that is offensive in any way, I should probably work on, but taking somebody who has dementia, they are confused about many things, and placing them in a confusing setting. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am more than of able mind and body right now,
Yep.
But if you put me in a hospital, I'm going to say, what the heck's going on? Mm-hmm. You take a confused person and put them in a confused setting, I have issues with that, frankly. I will tell you, because of these personal issues, if that ever happens to me, there's a whole new, of course, it's not necessarily happening in the United States. I could tell you there's places in Amsterdam, in some of the Nordic countries, there are entire towns devoted to dementia. I'm talking husband, wife, spouses go together to the town. They're already signed up for it. The entire town is a safe haven for those with dementia. You get to maintain your own home. There's nurses all over the place. If I have dementia and I walk out the front door, I hop on a bus and I decide that I don't want to go grocery shopping, but I want to go to the movie theater instead, that's fine. Guess what? The movie theater, the shopping greeters at the shopping store, they all know my name. They know where I live. They know my wife. It's perfectly fine for me to run around this town and just, hey, and you know what? The fact of the matter is, if I am in this state of mind and I'm able to do my thing around there, I'm probably going to live a little bit longer. I promise I'm going to live a little bit better, though.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, getting back to how we started with your bookcase,
yeah,
your oak bookcase is very happy, isn't
yes,
it? Right?
It sure is.
So understanding, and let's bring this full circle,
yes,
understanding the opportunity to improve lives of people as they age, that's what it's all about. That truly is, frankly, our purpose.
Right.
Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a heavy topic, but it's something that needs to be just talked about openly because you don't know who's going to be affected. Let's be honest and let's be real about it. Understand if anybody's vulnerable financially, physically, emotionally, on all different levels. With people who know you when you're perfectly healthy and can kind of tell when things might be getting off a little bit. That's That's how we rock. That's how we roll. I am Patty Brennan. We are Key Financial. Michael Brennan, thank you so much for being you. Your oak bookcase is alive and well.
It sure is.
Your flimsy one is pretty good, too. Every once in a while, those books at the top. No, but all kidding. Hey, for all of us, let's face it, for all of us. And that's the thing, is to understand this is all part of being human.
That's right. And just know, I promise I will visit you and Dad in Amsterdam.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Michael Brennan.
Of course.
Folks, this is Key Financial. We are wealth management with wisdom and care. And boy, there's no better way to show that than what we're talking about today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a great day.